The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of the Kingston mansion, its golden rays dancing across the marble floor. Outside, the city stirred with life, but inside the house, silence ruled. The air was cold and sterile, untouched by laughter or warmth. The mansion gleamed with wealth. Chandeliers glittered, art lined the walls, and every step echoed against the polished stone. But beneath the perfection, there lingered a hollow kind of loneliness. In that sea of luxury lived a quiet story that no one noticed. It wasn't written in the language of power or money, but in the gentle heartbeat of a little girl with tired eyes and a heart too big for her small frame. Her name was Lily, the maid's daughter, a child who carried both innocence and wisdom beyond her years. That day, her life would cross paths with one of the most powerful men in the city, Alexander Kingston, a billionaire whose empire stretched across nations, but whose heart had long forgotten what kindness felt like. Before we go deeper, if you believe in second chances and compassion, and the power of love to soften even the hardest hearts, pause for a moment. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Let's keep spreading hope, one story at a time. It all began on a bright Monday morning. Maria, Lily's mother and the Kingstons' longtime maid, arrived at the mansion earlier than usual. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the keys, trying to hide the exhaustion she carried. She whispered for Lily to sit quietly in the kitchen while she started her chores. For nearly 8 years, Maria had served the Kingston household. She was humble, loyal, and grateful for the work, even when it left her body aching and her spirit weary. Every mop stroke, every polished surface, every long day was done not for herself, but for the little girl waiting quietly in the corner, the miracle she had prayed for after years of loss and heartbreak. Lily had grown up watching her mother scrub floors and polish silverware in a home that wasn't theirs, yet she never envied the glittering luxury around her. Her dreams were simpler: to see her mother smile without worry, even just once. Upstairs, Alexander Kingston began his day the way he always did, alone. He was a man carved from discipline and precision, his schedule measured down to the minute. The world knew him as a visionary, a man who built an empire from steel and silence. But behind closed doors, he was something else entirely: lonely, detached, and quietly broken. Years ago, his wife had walked out, taking their only son after a bitter divorce that left Alexander colder than ever. Since then, the mansion had turned into a monument of success and solitude, a gilded cage of his own making. He filled the emptiness with meetings, contracts, and numbers, convincing himself that emotions were a weakness only the poor could afford. That morning, fate decided to intervene. When Alexander walked into the kitchen for his usual black coffee, he stopped short. A small figure stood on a stool, stretching her tiny arms toward a tall cabinet. "Careful," he said sharply. Startled, Lily turned around, sunlight spilling over her golden hair, her cheeks flushed with guilt as she clutched a sugar jar. "I just wanted to make my mom's coffee taste better," she said softly, her voice trembling yet sincere. For a moment, Alexander said nothing. No one in his house ever spoke to him like that, without fear, without formality. There was something disarming in her simplicity, in the pure intention behind her words. He left the kitchen without another word, but the small moment stayed with him long after. Later that day, the routine shattered. As Maria polished the hallway floors, her vision blurred. She staggered, then collapsed before the grand staircase. Alexander, passing by, froze. Then, for the first time in years, instinct overrode indifference. He rushed forward, calling out for help. Moments later, his voice echoed to the mansion as he ordered his driver to take Maria to the hospital. The billionaire who never missed a meeting found himself sitting in a hospital lobby, waiting for news about his maid. The sterile room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Alexander sat in silence, a cup of untouched coffee in his hands. Across from him, Lily sat on a bench clutching a worn-out doll, her legs swinging but her face still. She didn't cry. She only whispered to herself, "I'll take care of her." Alexander heard those words, and something deep within him shifted. When the doctor finally returned, the news was cautiously hopeful. Maria was stable, but she needed rest, medication, and time away from heavy work. Alexander nodded slowly. He wasn't sure why he cared so much, But he did. He told the doctor to send the bills to him and arranged for Maria to recover in the guest suite of his mansion, under the care of his private nurse. For the first time in years, Alexander Kingston brought someone home out of compassion, not convenience. At first, the arrangement was awkward. Alexander tried to keep his distance, retreating to his office whenever laughter echoed through the halls. But Lily, bright, curious, and endlessly kind, had a way of slipping through the cracks of his cold world. She began leaving small drawings on his desk: a stick figure man with a smiling face, a house surrounded by flowers, little notes that read, "Have a good day, Mr. Kingston," or "You should smile more." And strangely, he found himself smiling. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion began to feel different. There were flowers on the table again. The smell of home-cooked meals replaced the sterile scent of imported. Candles, laughter, soft, innocent laughter, echoed to the grand halls like music he didn't realize he'd missed. One afternoon, Alexander watched Lily in the garden. She was feeding crumbs to the birds, humming quietly to herself. The sunlight made her hair shimmer like gold. Something in that image moved him, a child so full of love, despite having so little. He walked toward her, unsure why his heart felt lighter than it had in years. "You know," he said, his voice gentler than usual, "I think I owe you and your mom something for all you've done." Lily turned, her blue eyes wide with curiosity. "How about this?" Alexander continued, smiling faintly. "I'll grant you 3 wishes. Anything you want." Her face lit up, but her response was not what he expected. "I want my mom to stop crying when she thinks I'm asleep," she said softly. The word struck him like lightning. He blinked, momentarily speechless. In his world, people asked for money, cars, luxury, but this child asked for her mother's peace. He knelt to her level. "Consider it done," he said quietly. And he meant it. The next morning, he called his lawyers and accountants. By noon, Maria's debts were gone. He arranged for her medical treatments, doubled her salary, and gave her official leave until she fully recovered. But more than the material gestures, he made sure she had something she hadn't had in years: time to rest, to breathe, to live. Lily's first wish had already changed the house. Her kindness was contagious. And Alexander Kingston, a man who once believed love was weakness, began to feel again. The days that followed were unlike anything the Kingston mansion had ever seen. Gone were the echoing footsteps and cold silences that used to dominate the halls. In their place came the soft chatter of a little girl, the aroma of freshly baked bread, and the faint sound of laughter drifting from the kitchen. For the first time in years, Alexander Kingston's home felt alive. Maria was regaining her strength, her face no longer pale with exhaustion. Each morning, she would wait to find her daughter already busy at work, drawing, singing, or waiting for Alexander to appear so she could offer him one of her famous paper hearts. She made them from old notepads, carefully folded, each one carrying a little message. "Don't forget to smile today," or "You're doing great, Mr. Kingston." At first, Alexander pretended not to notice. But soon, those notes began to decorate his desk, tucked between business reports and contracts, quiet reminders of a life he thought he'd lost the right to live. One afternoon, while he was reviewing documents in his office, Lily tiptoed in. She hesitated at the door before walking up to him. "Mr. Kingston?" she said softly. He looked up from his laptop. "Yes, Lily?" She smiled. "I want to use my second wish." Alexander leaned back in his chair, curious. "Oh, you already know what it is." She nodded firmly. "I want you to smile again." For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He had expected something tangible, maybe a doll, a puppy, or a trip to the amusement park. But instead, she asked for something so simple, and yet for him, so impossible. He tried to smile, awkwardly at first, but Lily shook her head. "Not like that. I mean really smile like when you're happy inside." Her words hit a place in him he'd locked away long ago. It had been years since anyone had looked at him with such pure belief, as if he was capable of being happy again. That evening, after dinner, Lily insisted he join her in the garden. The two sat under the twilight sky, feeding breadcrumbs to the doves. She told him stories about her school, her dreams of becoming an artist, and how she wanted to make paintings that made people feel less lonely. "Do you ever feel lonely, Mr. Kingston?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "Sometimes," he admitted quietly. "But I thought if I worked hard enough, I wouldn't have to feel anything at all." Lily looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. "That's not how hearts work," she said gently. "They're not machines. They don't stop needing love, even if you try to make them." He smiled then, really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and made the corners crinkle. And for the first time in years, the laughter that followed didn't feel foreign. From that night on, things began to change. Alexander started joining them for breakfast. He replaced cold silence with small talk, learned how Maria liked her coffee, and listened when Lily told him about her drawings. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, to the sound of Lily's footsteps running. Down the hall, the once empty mansion had transformed into a home filled with warmth, stories, and quiet joy. One morning, while Lily was painting in the living room, Alexander stood watching her from the doorway. He realized she had given him something no amount of wealth could buy: peace. Maria noticed it too. She often caught him smiling at the little girl, as if seeing the world anew. Sometimes, when Lily wasn't looking, Alexander's expression softened with a kind of silent gratitude. Weeks passed, and Maria's health returned completely. She began working again, not as a maid, but as the household manager. Alexander made sure she never felt like a servant again. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation, now breathed with warmth and purpose. Then came the evening of Lily's third wish. It was late autumn. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a golden glow over the living room. Alexander sat in his favorite chair with a book in hand, while Lily sat cross-legged on the carpet, sketching something quietly. After a while, she put down her pencil and looked up. "Mr. Kingston," she said, "I think it's time for my last wish." He smiled warmly. "You've been very patient. What will it be this time? A new bike? Maybe a trip to the amusement park?" Lily shook her head. "No, I want something else." Her eyes glimmered in the firelight, filled with that same gentle wisdom that always caught him off guard. "I want you to forgive yourself." The word silenced the room. Alexander froze, the book slipping slightly from his hand. "For what?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lily looked at him, her gaze steady. "For whatever made you stop believing that you're a good person." He stared at her, his throat tightening. He wanted to answer, to explain, but the words refused to come. For years, he had carried guilt like an invisible chain. Guilt over the marriage that failed, over the son who no longer called, over the years he spent hiding behind work instead of facing the pain. He had convinced himself he didn't deserve forgiveness. But this little girl, sitting before him with nothing but kindness in her heart, had seen through it all. Tears welled in his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in decades. "Lily," he whispered, "I don't know if I can." She stood, walked over, and placed her small hand over his. "You already did," she said softly, "when you helped my mom, when you smiled again, when you started to care." The walls he had built for years finally crumbled. He pulled her into a gentle hug, holding her as if afraid she might disappear. That night, Alexander Kingston, the man who thought he was made of stone, wept quietly by the fire. But his tears weren't of grief. They were a release, of healing, of finally being seen. From that night forward, nothing in the mansion was the same. Alexander kept his promise to Lily. He arranged for her to attend one of the best schools in the city, personally funding her education all the way through college. Maria continued to work by his side, no longer just as an employee, but as family. And every morning, as sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, the mansion seemed to glow a little brighter, as though the universe itself was smiling upon them. Alexander still had moments of silence, times when the memories crept in, but now there was laughter to balance it. There was Lily's singing echoing down the hall. There was Maria's warm presence, and the quiet peace of knowing he wasn't alone anymore. In a way, Lily had given him far more than 3 wishes. She had given him back his heart. And as the days turned to months and the seasons changed outside the Grand Kingston estate, one truth became clear. Sometimes, the smallest hands can heal the deepest wounds, and the purest hearts can remind even the coldest souls what it means to live again.